Hi, and welcome to Authors Die Twice, a podcast about video games and aesthetic theory hosted by two living failures. I'm Brian, and in this bonus Halloween episode, I'm joined as always by Nathan to discuss the Bloodborne DLC, The Old Hunters. We talk about beasts in pain and the strange phenomenon of final act coziness and otherwise dark works of art. I have to make a quick correction, though I doubt anyone really cares. At one point, I mention a hypothetical game and call it Elden Ring Dungeon Designer. I meant to say Bloodborne Dungeon Designer, but I suppose Elden Ring would work just as well. As always, if you have questions or comments, you can email us at authorsdietwice@gmail.com. And we hope you enjoy this episode.
So you texted me the other day and you were like, I forgot how amazing the Bloodborne DLC is. What was it in particular that was like really hitting for you?
I think I was trying to figure this out. I think I actually just really love the bosses. There's almost seems to be I don't know if it's a new level, but maybe just like a reinforcement or a re-emphasis of how just dark the game is. Like the boss battles, I was just watching a playthrough. I think it's like the Ludwig battle. Ludwig is just like wailing in pain the whole time. Like everything seems to just be in pain, you know? Like usually we think about, the kind of menacing, they're all menacing, right? But that kind of flip side of it that seems to be um just a little bit darker, right? It's not just like stuff that's out to get you, it's stuff that is trapped there and is out to get you, and you're also trapped there. I was trying to think about it too, because I know that we are kind of swearing off lore, but the idea that the hunter's nightmare is a kind of like mutual curse or something is also, I think, pretty interesting and maybe connects back to some of the ideas we had a few episodes back where we were talking about just how things are kind of broken in this world, you know? So I think the DLC as a kind of, lopsided addition to the main game does do a little bit to help flesh out some of those feelings or those thoughts.
Yeah, that's a great point that the bosses, at least the two, like for Ludwig and the Orphan of Kos or Kos, you're right that they're both like just wailing when you're fighting, and they seem like they're in agony. Maybe like like the Orphan of Kos seems like it's in kind of like emotional, psychological agony. And Ludwig seems like it's in a kind of physical agony with these like limbs kind of thrashing everywhere.
Yeah.
And it did make me think like what are some other video game bosses that are, I mean, to start, like bosses that are also in excruciating pain?
Mhm.
I'm sure they exist, but I'm having a hard time thinking of any. Actually, you mentioned in Final Fantasy X, there's
Yeah.
that boss Anima, who's
Yeah.
like a summon demon who's like in chains and looks like is suffering or being tortured. And
Hmm.
it's like the most powerful summon. So maybe that would be an example. I was thinking of bosses that are simultaneously imposing and in agony, because Orphan, of course, is like the hardest boss in the game, one of the hardest bosses in the series. Ludwig, if you're going in solo, is really tough as well, especially the first phase. Um, I guess Anima in Final Fantasy X is a decent example. I haven't played that game in maybe 20 years, but isn't he summoned? He's summoned by Seymour, right? Like by the villain, and he's the villain's summon. So he actually is pretty scary and he's pretty strong, I think. He's an early boss fight, as I remember, but um he's definitely yeah, like maybe he has a bit of that combination of like both you fear him and you pity him, or you just like want to put it out of its misery or something.
Yeah, so I do think that you misgendered Anima. I'm pretty sure it's a she. But that was exactly what came to mind when you asked that question. It's totally, I mean, it almost even visually kind of reminds me of like some of the Bloodborne, or makes me think of the Bloodborne bosses. But also, so what's dark about it too is that, the attack that Anima will use is just called pain.
Hmm.
And then there's also an attack that's called Oblivion, or the overdrive is called Oblivion, which again just feels like it totally, I mean, it links up almost accidentally with so many things we've talked about already on the pod, like this idea of oblivion or like amnesia or, forgetfulness being this kind of dark thing, but also just pain being like such a weird at once such a concrete thing, but like also unspeakable, like something that can't really, I mean, it can be quantified in certain ways, but just kind of unrepresentable, I think, or only representable in sort of extreme ways. And I think that's kind of part of what Bloodborne is doing. I would also say too, I mean, of course, like some of the stuff from Silent Hill, those bosses as well. Some of those are, I mean, it's a pretty pained game, but I feel like that's a little bit more on the nose in certain ways.
That's true. Silent Hill is a great example, and even Pyramid Head, who's like a kind of, I mean, in the lore of Silent Hill, I guess the idea, I think I read this just on like a Wikipedia summary, but that is that to flash back to our many episodes on Silent Hill too, we never touched on this, but Pyramid Head, I think is supposed to be a kind of projection of James's desire for punishment based on this like historical painting he saw of an executioner in the historic Silent Hill, like in back in the whatever colonial times or something.
Yeah.
Uh, so he's like, I think he's kind of an avatar of pain for like of someone who inflicts pain, but he also seems like he's in pain. Like it seems deeply uncomfortable or painful to wear. That mask is almost like a vise or something, that giant
Mhm.
metal thing on its head. Uh,
Yeah. One, it's also a form of sensory deprivation too, which is another like kind of dark, if you try to like really dig down into that, that's like kind of dark, like to just be, walking around, which also I guess we have in Bloodborne too, right? We have the kind of blindfolded characters, and this odd idea of kind of purifying the senses to get at something else, which also oddly, another connection, the Meshuggah song that I mentioned, New Millennium Cyanide Christ, right, is all about kind of dulling the senses or eradicating the senses in order to like reach some kind of internal purity or, insight or something like that, which I guess I just find to be like a very dark, like a very strange and dark concept to try to
yeah.
actually imagine.
And is Anima blindfolded or just sort of chained inside? Like it has wings that are sort of like chained in, right? It's almost like in a shell, or like a pod, as I remember. And
Yeah,
it's
so it
right,
looks like it has, I don't know if it's wings or a pod, but yeah, I don't know about blindfolded, but yeah, it's just kind of chained up. And the thing is that it like therefore can't move, so it's
right.
also like a boss that doesn't move but is able to, deal a lot of damage, which is
It's basically like a giant demon in a straitjacket, right?
yeah, yeah,
But
basically.
then, but then if you use its ultimate limit break or what I forget what they're called, overdrive,
Mhm.
doesn't it? I mean, doesn't the perspective shift to a mirror reflection underground, and then their anima is unchained and kind of like goes berserk and like throws a bunch of dark energy at the enemy in a kind of fit of pure rage?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question. I would have to
Yeah,
revisit
because
it.
you get maybe did you fight? I can't remember when you were recent because you were playing that game recently, right?
Um, it was I think a couple years ago, but
You
yeah.
eventually get Anima as a summon, I'm pretty sure. Is that the
Yeah.
last summon you get? And then maybe you have to have Anima as like on your side in order to use that special attack. I'm not sure if Seymour ever uses it against you or Seymour's Anima. How does Anima end up? I need to refresh myself on Final Fantasy X actually because I actually have no. I remember all those like the PS1, PS2 era games really well, but I'm now blanking. I don't think you go through a temple to get Anima. You have to go through a temple to get the other summons, right? Um, Maybe not. Maybe I'm just confused.
I don't
But
remember. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, just a quick side note on Final Fantasy X, because it is like such an unlikely pairing, Bloodborne and Final Fantasy, especially Final Fantasy X, which is, I think, endlessly memed just because of like the ha ha ha
Yeah.
scene, the laughing scene, which is an all-time Final Fantasy moment with Titus. He has such a sort of sunny, he has a kind of sunny disposition, and the game has this whole like tropical island theme where it's like you're kind of on a beach vacation, but you're on a beach vacation with like 10 belts on your swimsuit or whatever. But despite that, like it's actually apt because I think Final Fantasy X is the darkest of those games by far.
Mm.
Beyond the superficial sort of the bright colors and the beachy aesthetic, like the the concept of Sin, who's this sort of ecological demonic event that regularly descends on these coastal cities and just like destroys them, like wiping out thousands, if not millions of people. And nobody can do anything about that. But then ultimately, I guess spoiler is like the fact that you're dead or whatever, you're a ghost, and the game ends with you just like, yeah, it's like actually you're dead, so you can't get to enjoy the happy ending. You just disappear with everybody else. Um, that's like it's a pretty yeah, it's pretty dark, it's pretty heavy.
Yeah.
So I love the game for that reason, especially in retrospect. Like that again, that weird or that really spicy and interesting dissonance between the way the game presents itself and like what's going on at its core.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think oftentimes I think we've talked about this before maybe, but the most brightly lit thing can sometimes be the darkest. And I think that's why Anima 2 is so effective in that game as just something that really stands out, you know?
Yeah, and this is really why you have to play Outer Wilds because Outer
Mm.
Wilds perfects that. It just lives in that dissonance between the kind of cartoony, folksy, cute exterior and just like pure existential dread at its core, which is and kind of these palpable moments of panic, like where your cute little alien gets buried alive and you have to just like watch it get buried alive by sand, um, or like suffocate in the depths of space.
Mm.
So there's lots of dark things that can happen to your avatar, but also the overall theming and sort of questions that it's invested in are really intense.
Yeah. So what, I mean, I know, and I think we alluded to this. I know that, you really kind of were prompting me to play the DLC. I mean, what are your thoughts about the Bloodborne DLC?
I think it's by far the best DLC that they've made. That's a very lukewarm opinion. I think it's shared by many fans of the series, if not most. But it is like, I mean, trying to think now, like, what is it that really, I think it's partially just how radical a environmental shift it is when you get to that fishing village at the very end.
Yeah.
I mean, there are it's just a mind-bending and transcendent moment already. Like when you ascend this giant clock tower and then you step out from the clock tower into um, uh, a beach. It's like it makes no spatial sense. In fact, it's a totally naturalized or justified version of the infamous transition in Dark Souls 2, where you climb all the way to the top of a windmill, and then you take an elevator from the roof of the windmill up into a volcano. I talk about this in the book. Um, so in the latter case, like it's seen as this sort of design defect, like a shortcoming of the world, a radical inconsistency. Whereas in Bloodborne, I mean, on basic level, just because you're already in a nightmare realm and space and time are already totally contradictory, it's okay. But because it's justified, then you can just really enjoy, almost luxuriate in the incongruity of like stepping through what you think is the highest point in Bloodborne's world and then finding yourself in this whole other landscape. But far more than that, I think it's just the beauty and even the peacefulness of that rainy village that really speak to me. Like it's weirdly cozy. Like it feels almost aspirational. I'm like, damn, I could walk around those rainy streets and like stay at an inn, or like I think I texted you about like just ordering a hot steaming bowl of clam chowder or something, served by a fish man.
Yeah.
But it does have that like almost sense of like creature comforts or like habitability that's not there in Yarnum. Yarnum is so gothic and uh overbearing and oversized that it feels in the way that New York City to me feels just like totally inhospitable to human life. But the fishing village feels like yeah, like it's almost like it sort of beckons in its odd way, even though it's full of like crazed monsters. Um, so I think it's partly the kind of innate qualities of that environment, which are exquisite. Um, but it's also just, we've talked about this many times now. It's almost like I feel like I'm going to make it sound like a broken record, but precisely the environmental limitation of Bloodborne as a game allows that new biome, as it were, to just feel much more special and enlivening. Whereas I think one of the challenges for the Elden Ring DLC is that you have so many, you have so much environmental variety in Elden Ring that I mean, it must have been hard for the designers of Shadow of the Erdtree to come up with other biomes, with other sorts of places that could feel totally fresh and new. I think that's one thing that Souls DLCs have typically done. Like you get this really rich and beautiful snow world in Dark Souls 3 in the
Mhm.
first DLC, which is by far, I think, much better than the second DLC. You get a sort of pretty forest in Dark Souls 1 as opposed to the desolate, dark, haunted forest in the base game. So that sort of environmental variation, I think, is a hallmark of the series, and it again works because the games themselves are so limited in their palettes, and in the kind of places they present prior or have presented prior. So I think that, that's an important element too. And I don't know if any of the Souls games present something as radically different as the beachside town. I guess we're back on the beach theme too. Another connection to Final Fantasy X.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I think yeah, that's interesting because I feel like especially because the fishing village is like the or the fishing hamlet, I think as it's canonically known, I believe is the final, I mean, because that's where you find Kos, right? Or Kos. So
yeah.
it's like the very final, other than returning back and to the hunter's dream, it's the final like area of the entire game if if the DLC is uh after the base game. So there's an odd, I mean, I'm just trying to think about it because I think you're right. It feels kind of pastoral, but it almost feels, I don't want to just keep putting dark in front of every concept, but it feels like a dark pastoral, or it feels almost like, I mean, it feels like you get there and you're kind of, um, you've been through so much, especially like being on high alert through so much of the game that even though, I mean, as you know, that boss in there that you kind of have to go down to the bottom and find and kill is probably the most difficult or one of the most difficult bosses in the entire game. It almost feels like you're kind of in a daze when you're in. Like so there's a sense where it's comfy or whatever, but there's also a sense where it feels like I'm already dead or something, or it feels like I'm like, hallucinating this entire area, and therefore there is something still kind of unsettling about it. I don't know, that's how I'm kind of thinking about it now. It feels like almost like if you had this is a weird connection, but I was just, recently listening to a bunch of Nine Inch Nails. And the album The Downward Spiral, which is like an incredibly dark album that's, largely about addiction and self-destruction and all this stuff, has all these really intense songs with like just really heavy, like loud, distorted guitars and everything. But then it ends with the song Hurt, which is like the kind of ballad, right? So it's the very final song that's supposed to be this cycle of you know, the song before, I'm pretty sure, essentially ends with like the speaker killing himself. And then it ends with a song that's just this kind of pretty beautiful, really dark song that almost feels like it feels like ebbing water or something like that. Like it has this kind of odd, um, and I wonder if it's a denouement or if it's something else because it almost like doesn't necessarily tie things together. I guess it depends on how you look at it.
Yeah, the idea just to think of again schematically, whatever, or abstractly, like artworks, sequential artworks, film, games, novels, and music, where the final bit there's a kind of beautiful epilogue in a sort of patently non-beautiful work. Is actually it's a really cool category to think through. I'll throw out two more just to add them to the conversation. The album Yeezus by Kanye West, which I which I texted you about the other day, a line from the final song. But that's another case of like it's like the album dies and goes to heaven or whatever, and then you have
Mhm.
like the original Kanye, like college dropout Kanye with like
Yeah.
sweet samples and Yeah, it's just like a really joyous song in its way. The In Paradisum movement of Fauré's Requiem. I don't know if you know that. It's like my favorite Requiem. An incredible piece of choral music. But it's really, really dark in a lot of ways and sort of churning, and tempestuous. And then the final movement is like sublimely sweet and placid, almost to the point of being saccharine. But it works so well because of how powerful a contrast it is with the rest of the Requiem. Um, so I think I would say the Old Hunters, and particularly the Fishing Hamlet, has a little bit of that. Like
Yeah.
I would call it beautiful. Whereas, I guess maybe it's like the sublime and the beautiful, whereas the rest of Bloodborne is sublime, if it's anything. Um, and that's also to do in kind of Burkean terms, I guess, with its small scale, its sort of intimate delicacy, of this very curated little fishing village. Again, this is I'm kind of free associating here, but just to underscore this point, there is something I do. I always did this with Elder Scrolls avatars. I would sort of retire them, and when I retired them, I would like put them in a place that I wanted them to be. So I would like hike my Skyrim guy up to the top of a mountain and wait for the sunset, and then save the game, and you get the little screen grab in your save file, and I would just be like, okay, that's the end of that file, and he's just like up the mountain looking at the sunset or whatever.
Yeah.
And literally, like I feel like I like to bring my Bloodborne avatars to the beach, or to the coast or whatever, like the Orphan of Coast, partly just as bragging rights to be like this file completed, because you can't get that lantern without beating the Orphan of Coast. But also, I'm literally just sending my hunters to the beach to like for a much deserved rest after I complete their files.
Yeah.
I've said this podcast before. I don't do New Game Plus because I think it screws with the balance, and it's just not. I'd always just rather do a new file. So, um, I have at least one, maybe multiple Bloodborne avatar saves, just like right at the beach. It's like they're going to Florida or something.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, I mean, I also think I can't remember exactly what it's called, but that entire sort of like research facility or whatever it is, right? Or uh
Oh, and I guess, yeah, sorry. I mean, I am just remembering my first time playing the Old Hunters. Even before I got to the coast, before I got to the hamlet, I was like, this is the best DLC they've ever made because the research tower is just mind blowing. I mean, you
yeah,
like mentioned the figure of like, a spiraling album, like, or is
yeah,
it called Downward Spiral? Like, it's like, a microcosm of the spiral structure of Dark Souls 1, but in a single dungeon
yeah,
where like it's this vertical, yeah, this incredible vertical, massive vertical chamber where you're sort of branching off. You're basically walking up the central staircase that's like the branch of a tree and going to these different parts and then finding your way to different branches. But then you can eventually move the trunk,
yeah.
shift the stairwell, and then you access a whole other side of the level. I mean, to my mind, it's probably the best single space in any FromSoft game, in terms of pure design. They sort of redo it with the Shadow Keep and Shadow of the Erd Tree, but it's not as good. I love the Shadow Keep, but it doesn't have the kind of just the tightness of the research. I think it's called the research hall, right?
Yeah, I think you're right.
There
Yeah.
are those unique enemies with swollen heads. Like that's like just really creepy. Like
Yeah.
these people are kind of stumbling around with these massively distended heads that are like wrapped and kind of bloody, right? It's like they have their heads are swelling or turning into, um, I don't even know. That's part of what's so scary is you don't see what's under the bandages.
Right, and it's another emblem of something that's just in pain, and
Right.
especially thinking about like whether that pain is self-inflicted or if it's like some kind of experiment gone wrong or whatever, you know? I mean, um, just bolsters how dark this game is, right? It's like a new way of seeing that. And I almost wonder too, because, you know, a lot of I think I am thinking maybe a little bit more about just like the lore, the dialogue that we get in the game and things like that. And so much of it feels like pretty abstract, right? Like there's all this stuff that we keep getting repetitions of or hearing about. different types of blood and, the whatever blood administration and all this stuff. And then these kind of intersecting weird things, beasts and hunters and all that. But that's a moment where we see like, this is maybe we've already seen obviously a bunch of beasts and people who have like consumed this blood or something and turned into a beast, but or gained beasthood, I guess we could put it. But then in that, when we have this entire like, yeah, it's a research hall, right? So it's almost like um an odd, maybe darker version of our scholar friends that we see in the base game, right? Like these guys have the kind of huge heads. I mean, they're not like blobs that are kind of funny that are moving around. They're definitely more dangerous, I think. They're harder enemies, and they're also just then you also find these ones that are like strapped to chairs and stuff like that that are I think there's like an NPC that's like that, which is also dark. They're just begging you to bring it some kind of fluid or something. Um, I will say I don't think I've ever in Bloodborne. This is actually a question I wanted to maybe ask too. That's slightly related. I don't know if I've ever followed out an entire NPC quest line in Bloodborne. I wonder if you usually do that or if you have.
I don't usually. Some I've done it a few times. I try with Souls games to do every quest line at least once. There are a few in Elden Ring that I have never done. Like I've never done the one with the little monkey. Do you know that guy?
I don't think so
He's
actually.
actually kind of hard to find because he's inside of a bush. Like at the first camp you find in Elden Ring, there's like a bush that's talking, and but it's really the game's not graphically sort of advanced enough to represent that. So you're just kind of like, what? Like is somebody yelling at me? And people are always yelling at you, yelling in
Yeah,
conversation
yeah.
in Elden Ring
I
anyway.
know that moment and I've never found where it was actually. I think I never bothered to look it up. So okay,
Yeah, it's
interesting.
like a little monkey who will like sew your clothes, who will like sort of alter your garments for you. But I think it's a monkey or some kind of creature. But yeah, I think in Bloodborne you don't really have quest lines. The only prolonged quest line I can think of is the Eileen quest where you help her fight a bunch of maybe three really powerful human NPC hunters.
Hmm.
But it's not like Dark Souls and particularly Dark Souls I think one where you have like the Onion Knight quest is pretty
Yeah,
elaborate
yeah.
and you meet them at certain points and there are
Mhm.
triggers that you can miss. As I remember, there isn't much like that. There's the one with Alfred who goes to the Canehurst Castle, but that's basically like a two-step quest. Like you tell him where the castle is and then he goes there.
Yeah.
Are there any in the DLC? I guess there's that one guy, Simon, right? The guy
So
with the
there's the
bow.
guy who's like leaning against a door at one point.
Yeah.
There's also a guy who's in some kind of jail cell, I think, that you don't have a key for, but I believe you can get the key somehow. So this is all off the top of my head because I noticed these NPCs and I mean, I guess the thing that should be obvious, but we should maybe touch on if it's not, is that NPCs in Bloodborne and Dark Souls are there for a really specific purpose, and they're not, it's not like obviously Elder Scrolls or something like that, where they're just like, a million NPCs that you can just kill with no consequence. I mean, you can kill any of them in the Souls games, but just like we talked about with Elden Ring and how complex and kind of unmarked a lot of the gameplay is and a lot of the sort of potential plot lines that you can kind of play out. There's absolutely nothing kind of telling, the dialogue is so sparse and so kind of odd and sometimes absurd that it's really hard to tell like what is to be gained by, killing them or not killing them, or I usually just end up killing them, because I don't have the patience to figure out where they are going to go next, or whatever. But I think the most I've ever done is there's the part where you get to I'm blanking on the name, but it's that kind of like you go a little bit underground and then there's like a lantern there. There's a weird uh thing sitting on the floor, like an NPC who says like tell people it's safe here, bring them here.
Oh,
And then I think there are like three or four different NPCs from elsewhere in the game that you can tell to go there. And one of them, the one that I have brought there is like you knock on a door and it's an old woman and you tell her to go there, I think.
Yeah.
Um, so that's it. I'm just wondering because I think we're talking a lot about identification and how silent I guess of a game this is, and that's something really striking to me. Um, but when we do have NPCs, they feel totally singular and they feel, you know, totally indispensable to such an extent that so this is something I've been thinking about lately is that I still haven't completed, I've beat the game multiple times, but I certainly haven't done all the quest lines. I haven't found every single item. I haven't, done everything. And even in the playthrough I'm in now, I'm still uh, stubbornly trying to kill the optional flame dog. I'm still stuck there. And I also still have not gotten back to like the original of the Hunter's Dream. So I still like need to go find that spot and get there. And I do want to actually find all that before I complete the file or finish the playthrough. Um, but I'm realizing, more and more we've talked about scarcity and how scarcity like breeds this kind of like completionism, I think, in the game or raises the stakes to a certain degree. But I think the same is true of how the NPCs are. Like I feel I have an impulse always to just go kill them, but then I also kind of always regret it after I do because I feel like there's no replacement for that one. And I'm gonna have to wait, however many hours to go talk to them again or something like that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, again, like not to beat a dead horse, but the scarcity and therefore the uniqueness of everything in Bloodborne is just extraordinary and is the secret to, or not the secret, but it's like the special ingredient that makes this by far my favorite Souls game. Um, I would say I think that informs how I treat NPCs and that I often uh you're basically almost always going to get some kind of special item from them and often a weapon that you just cannot get anywhere else. And that's really, really special in Bloodborne in a way
Yeah.
that it's not even in Elden Ring that where you have special weapons, there are so many that it doesn't feel as significant. And
Yeah.
they're curated and they're not as unique because in Bloodborne, all the weapons have like these special effects or these trick, functions, which
Yeah.
makes them already just more exciting. Um, I write about this in the book, but it to this day, it still blows my mind and gratifies me immensely that Ludwig's Holy Blade, the weapon that you have to get, you don't defeat Ludwig for it. I mean, you do, but then you have to talk to a severed head.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
talks to you like with this sort of like very refined accent and sort of sounds like William Blake or something. He's talking about like wandering amongst the stars or the moons.
Mhm.
Um, and he gives you that's where you get the sword and it's very easy to miss. But if you get it, like using the laser function on that weapon is a totally unique particle effect. Like only that weapon when Ludwig wields it and when the player wields it has that just beautiful, those like beautiful waves of green light. Like nothing else in Bloodborne shoots lasers. I
Yeah.
guess the amygdala do, but it's a purple laser. It's not a green laser.
Yeah.
Um, and just like I know I sound like a child, but the fact that you only get a green laser by using the special weapon that just fucking rules. Like that's not how games work.
Yeah.
Like simply put, games don't do that. Games might have like you'll get a laser effect, but you've seen it elsewhere, and this time it's on a sword, because someone had to design the laser effect. It's like it's a visual effect that has to be created. And so
Right.
to have it tied to this ultra rare, ultra special weapon is just so cool. I'll also say, um, well, first of all, when you say optional flame dog, I never followed up on this earlier, but do you mean the Cleric Beast reskin in the Hunter's Nightmare, or do you mean the Flame Dog in the Chalice Dungeons?
No, it's in the Hunter's Nightmare. So it's
Okay,
the
yeah.
other. It's not Ludwig. It's the other one that starts with an
Yeah,
L.
Lawrence. Lawrence.
Lawrence.
I
Lawrence.
always think of DH Lawrence, even though it's
Yeah.
spelled differently, but
Yeah.
I like to think that that's DH Lawrence crawling on the ground. Uh, yes. So there's also have you fought the Flame Dog in the Chalice Dungeons? Like an
At
actual
some point,
dog.
I haven't been doing them this time around, although I'd like to. I did actually dip into the Chalice dungeons. I mean, again, I know we're doing lots of Bloodborne content, but I think doing one on the Chalice dungeons at some point would be fascinating. Because I think, I mean, I haven't, so when I first played it, I played those a lot. Like I spent a lot of time in them. And I think that was before I got the DLC and played the DLC. And now I'm replaying the DLC. I haven't really uh, been in the dungeons too much, but now I know that I have like so many of the materials because I'm on like a new game plus already and I'm almost done with it. So I think I think that would be an interesting. I do want to say one thing though before I forget, which is that it's not, I mean, there's the scarcity that makes that sort of thing exciting, but it's also the fact that I think unlike a game like and this I guess goes in hand with scarcity and limitation, but unlike a game like Elden Ring, where you can just go anywhere at any time, and you can also brute force a lot of stuff to like a certain extent, where you can't in Bloodborne. Like the most rare stuff you can get in Bloodborne isn't usually just dropped by an enemy. It's again through one of these totally obscure, talking to a severed head or something totally random or almost like illogical, rather than just completing some kind of feat of, you know, button pressing, right? It's almost more about patience than it is about skill in a certain way, which I think is maybe another interesting angle on the game.
Yeah, for sure. And one last note on uniqueness is just that you should do the chalice dungeons because there are unique bosses down there, including the other optional flame dog, the harder optional flame dog, actually.
Uh-oh.
And the chalice dungeons don't scale, as far as I remember. So, they don't scale with New Game Plus. So actually, New Game Plus is a really good time to do them because some of the enemies are extra hard. So going in with a beefed up avatar is advisable. Um, you have to fight the flame dog a second time at half health, and it's just absolutely brutal. And then there's a totally unique final boss. You fight the Yarnum. Did you ever fight her, the queen, like the queen in like the white dress that you see a few times throughout the base game? You actually fight her as an enemy, in the
Yeah,
dungeon.
I think it's some when I did play. So I do remember fighting a boss at half health. So I think I may, at some point I think I did that, and then I also must have fought the queen. But there are so many dungeons too, right? I mean, there are so many different ones. So um, it's like a whole other aspect of the game that I just don't, I need to revisit.
Just a criminally underrated aspect of Bloodborne.
Yeah.
Like, I can't believe they never iterated on it in other Souls games.
Yeah. I mean, it almost feels like that's maybe what they're uh the new Elden Ring game feels almost like it could
Okay.
be like they could do that with Bloodborne and have just like a dungeon, dungeon what do you call it?
Generator, creator.
Something like that, yeah, where you kind of actually and this is kind of funny, but thinking of like an Elden Ring dungeon designer would be really funny. Like
Yeah,
a
I'll text you. I'll text you. I'll be like, hey, Brian, I built a new dungeon. You want to come check it out?
it's just all optional flame dogs. Um, yeah.
Should we wrap here? I feel like we
Yeah,
want to continue, right? Do you have any Halloween plans?
No, I don't know. I mean, I'm gonna try to play a little bit of Bloodborne probably because I think it's a good. I made a point of like starting to play it earlier because I knew that October is just always busy. So, um, really just play Bloodborne and actually read more Lovecraft because I've been dipping back into Lovecraft recently. So I think that pairing will be kind of interesting. What about
Awesome.
you?
I'm supposed to we're gonna watch the first Twilight movie, which I haven't seen. And I have been playing spooky games for October, so I just beat Resident Evil 7. I mentioned 8 like months ago in the podcast. I put it away for months and was like, oh, I'm probably not going to finish this. And in a burst of energy, went back and played to the end, and I really liked it. So
Nice.
um, I think I hit the October spooky series a little bit too hard because I'm scraping the bottom here. I finished the Alan Wake 2 DLC as well. And so I'm not sure. I might get that new Silent Hill game,
Mm,
Silent Hill F, which is
yeah.
a combination of Silent Hill and like Souls mechanics, I think. So it seems like it's sort of made for this podcast. Maybe we need to cover it.
Yeah.
Uh, TBD. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, especially on a cold, Halloween can get pretty cold, man. I mean, I remember one time I was actually got stranded in a graveyard because my car battery died and it was cold. And you know, I really just wish that I had a magic lantern to keep lit during that time for both light and warmth.
A magic jack-o'-lantern. Come on,
Yeah,
Brian.
exactly. So in other words, keep that magic jack-o'-lantern lit.
Sounds good, man. See ya. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.